This is Speaking of Writers. I'm Steve Richards. The book is 1871 to 2021, History Debunked, How Wars and the Scapegoat for Zionism Were Created. The author is Rowald Holt. Rowald was born in 1939 in southwest Germany. Before World War II started, his father owned a photo studio, but was drafted into the German army in 1941 and sent to the Russian front, where he died at year's end. His mother continued with the photo business until she died in 1949, and he spent his teenage years at his uncle's. In 1960, he emigrated to Canada, where he worked as a photographer, then went to university for a BA and B of education, and before retirement in 2000, he owned an apple and cherry orchard in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia. Happy to have the author, Rowald Holt, join me now here on Speaking of Writers. Rowald, welcome to this program.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Rowald, what was the inspiration for this book for you?
Well, I was always wondering why there was a war and why my dad had to go to war and die, and I never wasn't old enough to even remember him. You know, so then when I came to Canada, you know, I heard all of the stories about how bad the Germans were, and we still hear about the 6 million Jews that were gassed, you know, and I wondered what was the reason and where's the evidence. And I was researching how the war started, and even the First World War. And I thought something is funny about these whole history stories. And I did some research, and I found a lot of things that are just the opposite of what was written, and the news every day, you know, was told, and why is it always against Germany? And the Germans now, they have this guilt complex that was driven into them, you know. What about the other sides? What about the Russians, the communists? What have they done? What have the Americans done in all these wars they've conducted to spread the American way of life? And look at the American way of life nowadays. You know, I don't think it's too admirable. And so this is why I thought I should write a book about it and disclose all these lies and the propaganda, if I can find sources. And I always have a question when everything is so repeatedly propagandized, you know. Then we always have to ask why. Why do they have to do that? If you deal with the truth, you don't only have to tell it once. But if you deal with lies, they always have to be repeated, and that's what was it, Goebbels? I think if you repeat it long enough, you know, people perceive it as the truth, and then the truth becomes a lie, and that's exactly what happens today, and it happened before, and so that's why I wrote this book.
Rowald, I want to go back to your research, and you mentioned during your research that the most impressive event was the bombing of Freiburg. Talk about that bombing.
Yes, I was. My grandmother lived just about 5 kilometers outside the limit, the city limits, and just behind a mountain ridge where there's the vineyards. And so I was there with my cousin, and we were listening to the radio, some folk music, and we sang along, and all of a sudden the radio stopped, and there was an alarm signal coming through, and so we went outside, and we heard the bombers, coming in. It was about 8 o'clock or so at night. In the winter time, it was already dark, and pretty soon there was a green and red signal in sky. We said it was the Christmas trees. And that was the signal for bombing, and then the bombing starts, and the noise, and then the flag was shooting, and all this, and then the sky turned crimson, and it took about 20 minutes, and then the whole thing was over. So the next day was a clear day, and the wind carried all the ashes and everything over our area, and it fell down, so you could, and then the people came that were bombed out and survived, and they didn't have any food left, and so and Freiburg was not a military target. It was just pure revenge by Churchill, basically. To annihilate Germany, and this is what happened to cities, and hundreds of thousands of people burned to death, and so that was the Holocaust. That I would describe it as. So about the 6 million Jews. Where's the evidence? Nobody has ever come up with the evidence that it was 6 million, that it was maybe 1 million or 2 million. It's bad enough that many people died, and a lot of them were innocent. But it was all goes back to they had to sacrifice their own people in order to establish the state of Israel, which the Holocaust idea emerged only in 1947 because the Jewish elite wanted the world to be sorry for what happened, and then it would be easier to annex Palestine, which the Balfour Declaration promised the Jews, but it wasn't all that popular. But they had to make it popular, and in that case, the atrocities had to be created. Some happened, and some were just made up. So then the world was a little more lenient to what happened in Israel, or in Palestine at that time. And then again, as Benjamin Friedman, a very prominent Jew from the United States, said in his speech, the majority of Jews are not Israelites. They have no claim on Palestine, or had no claim, because they came originally from Caesarea. And this is there's Mike Harris and Preston James wrote an article called The Caesarean Mafia. And that's the group that runs Israel now, and I have a quote from Netanyahu, and that should make all Americans really concerned about having Israel as a good friend. And here is what he said: if we get caught, they will just replace us with persons of the same cloth. So it doesn't matter what you do. America is a golden calf, and we will suck it dry, chop it up, and sell it off piece by piece until there is nothing left but the world's biggest welfare state that we will create and control. Why? Because it is God's will, and America is big enough to take the hit, so we can do it again, and again. This is what we do to countries that we hate. We destroy them very slowly and make them suffer for refusing to be our slaves. Now, this is not a fiction. This is a quote from Netanyahu, and they also mentioned that Netanyahu was very instrumental in the 9/11 disaster. So all the stories about the Arabs and Osama bin Laden is a myth again and a lie. So telling what I discovered, it's not my idea or my story. I'm just a messenger.
We're chatting with Rowald Holt here on Speaking of Writers. His book is 1871 to 2021, History Debunked, How Wars and the Scapegoat for Zionism Were Created. Rowald, so what are the various ways humans have been controlled?
Well, when you go back to, there is a certain agenda that is pursued even today, and it's to destroy every independent country from within, if possible, and then take control of everything, and that will be the new world order. So there's a dark cloud on the horizon, but it has a silver lining, and the silver lining I can see today is Bitcoin, because all of the fiat currencies don't last. They have a certain time frame, and then what happens when you print or create money out of nothing. Something has to give. But with Bitcoin, there's only 21 million, and you cannot go over that, and so it's fungible, it's divisible, and the price will go up because there's just a limit, and with our fiat money, the numbers go up, but the value goes down. Value is less and less. So when you save money, the fiat money, you lose, because the next year you buy you use. I had a friend who had a $100 Canadian bill from 1954, and he said, "Wow, you have kept this." So that you could have got in the 60s or before 71, you could have bought 3 ounces of gold. Now the 3 ounces of gold are about $6,000 today. But in 50 or in 60, you could buy 1,000 cups of coffee for $100, and now you get 50 cups if you're lucky. So that's the value of money, of paper money.
Rowald, let's talk about free energy. How is the development of free energy being suppressed by greedy industrialists?
I had a friend here, and he was experimenting with free energy using magnetism, and he had a machine, and he displayed it at Princeton University, and the professors, the experts, they said, "Oh, there must be a source you're hiding." No, I said, "I take it out of the Volkswagen bus, had it in there," and he took it out on the lawn, and he was running it, and it ran. So they were scratching the head, and they wanted to know what's inside. He said, "No, that's I'm not going to disclose my invention." So they scratched their head, and then they said, "Well, if you think you can introduce this system, and then we have to rewrite all our technology books and science books. You're wrong. So they offered him money, and he said, "Well, I'm not going to be bribed, and you take the patent away from me, and the world will never hear anything about it again." And that happened to several. He died about 8 years ago, so it didn't go anywhere. But it's an indication that we have the technology, and Nikola Tesla had it same, and the same happened to him. And there was another one, Victor Schauberger, who did a lot of experimentation with water, and he was able to use water, and so they got him into the United States, and he didn't know English. It was after the war, because he was experimenting with the flying saucers for the Nazis, and so they figured they could get something out of him. So they tricked him into signing the papers, which were supposed to be just a permit to leave the United States and go back to Austria. Well, it turned out they took all his papers and everything he had, and so we never hear about it. I don't know what they use. Well, Area 51 has a lot of secrets that Stephen Greer is talking about, which means they are about 300 years ahead of the technology we know about. So there's so many things that are hidden from us, and the military-industrial complex. So they're interested in wars because you can make money out of wars, and that happens with Russia. Now they point the finger at Putin. Putin is a bad one. Well, who's agitating Putin? And the Ukrainians, a third of the population is Russian, and they're not interested in getting NATO in there, and Russia is very antsy about getting a rocket base pointing at them from the Ukraine. So that's why they want the Ukraine to be neutral. Switzerland has been neutral for a couple of hundred years. Nobody is afraid of, or the Swiss are not afraid that they are attacked from Germany or Italy or France or Austria, which surrounds Switzerland. So why couldn't that be done with Ukraine? They can do all kinds of trades and things with other nations, but they don't have to be aligned with NATO. So what happens with the promise made to Gorbachev that they wouldn't expand NATO, and the minute the Soviet Union was gone, they expanded NATO to Latvia or the Baltic countries and Poland. Poland was even before that in NATO. And what did they do? The first thing they did is establish a rocket base in Poland, and they said, we do that because we want to be protected from Iran, which is thousands of kilometers away, but Russia is just next door. So, the Russians are not that dumb, or Putin knows what's going on.
Rowald, I want to touch on education here. You argue that education would reduce poverty and overpopulation, too.
Yes. Well, that's one of the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. States that what you do to undermine a country, So you promote pornography, you promote religion to be wiped out, and education to be diminished to a lower level every time. So and you destroy the family, with divorces and everything that can undermine a country and a culture from within, is on their agenda, and it has been for the last 150 years. So, what you do, what we have to do, and there is something underfoot that they want. The lady in Alaska, judge, she wants to get rid of the maritime law and replace it with common law. And under common law is the law of the land, and the American Constitution is the best ever created in the world. But who adheres to it? The American government is ignoring it, and trespassing it every day. So we have a Canadian constitution, or sort of a constitution, and that is ignored too. And so when we have the law of the land being respected instead of the commercial maritime law, which is all fiction law, so then we can establish a better way of life and a society that works.
We're chatting with Rowald Holt here in our remaining moments. The book is 1871 to 2021, History Debunked, How Wars and the Scapegoat for Zionism Were Created.
I made reference to a lot of sources that can be looked up by people. I hope the book gives you a guideline to where you find more information and enhance what I've already started to explain. So this is, and I'm not. There's a lot of articles or sentences that some people might think, he's anti-Semitic. I'm not anti-Semitic. First of all, there's only 8% of the Jews are Semites. The rest are Khazars, have nothing to do with Israel or the Israelites. So it's a misnomer, and it's a myth again. So anyway, but I am not against these people. It's a small minority that does all the things that have caused trouble in the world. And so you take the 9/11, and you take these things, and when you research it and ask the question why, you'll find out what's behind it.
The book, by the way, is available at writersrepublic.com, also on Amazon as well. The author, Rowald Holt, the book, 1871 to 2021, History Debunked, How Wars and the Scapegoat for Zionism Were Created. Rowald, thank you so much for joining me.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
This is Speaking of Writers.